Hi everybody, this is Laura, City Scrapper. Thank you so much for joining me on my channel. Today I have a Shimmerz layout for you. To create this layout, I use the October Shimmerz color kits and also my stash of Shimmerz paints. I wanted to create a layout with lots of leaves, so I used a Spellbinders Stitched Fall Leaves die set. And I cut out quite a few leaves out of watercolor paper. This was just an inexpensive watercolor paper that I got from the craft store. Right now I'm making some yellowish orange leaves. I used a combination of Shimmerz in Marigold, and then I used a color splash spray called Squeeze the Day. And I combined those two colors to make the leaves that you see on the upper part of the screen right now. To add some variety, I also wanted to have some green leaves, so now I'm using a combination of two colors. I'm using the Creamies Boogie Board in blue, and I'm also using the Color Splash Spray in Once Upon a Lime. Before I began applying the paint, I sprayed some water onto the leaves. That way the colors would blend together a little bit more naturally. I also added some inklings in pistachio just to add another color of green. And then once that was all dry, I went back in again with the Boogie Board in blue, and I added a little more of that color. I love that teal color, and I think it looks really nice layered on top of the other greens. Off to the left, you can see that there are some other shapes that are cut out. Those are the outlines for each of these leaves, and I'm going to be using those in a little bit. Right now, I am adding some white splatters to all of the leaves. This is watered down white acrylic paint. I like the way this helps to kind of bring the yellowish and the greenish leaves together. It gives them a little something in common. I added a lot of splatters, mainly because most of the splatters are going onto my table rather than onto the leaves, but I continue to add quite a few splatters in white. And then I wanted to add a touch of gold to the leaves. So I once again use a color splash spray. This is called Back in the Saddle. It's a really pretty gold, perfect for fall. I set all of the leaves aside to dry, and now I'm working on my background. At this point, I wasn't sure exactly how I was going to arrange them, but I wanted to have some wood slats in the background. I cut some strips of paper. This is a thick 120-pound smooth white cardstock. I cut it into 2-inch strips, and then I used an embossing folder that I had in my stash. I do not use embossing folders as much as I should. This one is called Signature Collection by Sara Davies, and then I use it to emboss all of these strips. I had to emboss the longer strips a little bit at a time because, of course, the embossing folder is smaller than these strips of paper. I inked each of the strips using 2 distress inks. I used Antique Linen, that's the lighter color, and then I used Ground Espresso Second, that's the darker color. I found that it was best to start at the top of the paper, drag the ink across the whole paper, and then lift it up rather than trying to do it a little bit at a time. I found that no matter how lightly I pressed, if I started applying the ink in the middle of the paper, it would leave lines that I didn't really like. Now I'm figuring out that I want to put all of these strips of paper on a slant. I have the wood grain, in quotes, arranged in an alternating pattern. On some of the strips, the grain goes horizontally, and in some it goes vertically, and that goes back to the fact that I couldn't fit the whole strip of paper into the embossing folder and make horizontal wood grain lines in all of the papers, but I think it ended up working out okay. I liked the alternating between the two different directions. The design came together really quickly. I did most of the measuring by eye, but I did use the ruler a couple of times just to make sure that things were lined up, because sometimes what looks right to my eye at one time doesn't look so accurate later on. So I do like to use my ruler to double check some of my measuring. But you could see that I wasn't worried about the lines being exact. I did some tearing on the ends of the papers. I just really wanted it to look like a rustic wood background. For those smaller pieces on either end, I thought they were a little bit too big, so instead of cutting them, I just tucked the edge underneath the strip that was right next to it. So now I'm going to work on some pumpkins. I use the cut file from the October kit, and I cut out a whole bunch of pumpkins in a whole bunch of different sizes. I also cut out a solid backing for each of the cut files, and that way I could paint those and then layer the cut file on top of them, and then I would have some pumpkins for my layout. Earlier, I used my pencil to figure out where I should paint the backing piece orange, where I should paint it green, and where I should paint it a brownish color for the stem. I just used the cut file to help me figure that out, and then I began painting each of the pumpkins. I once again used a combination of colors. I used the Shimmerz Marigold again. I also used the Color Splash in Squeeze the Day, and I added in some Shimmerz Paints vibes called Chip Mauve the Old Block, and I mixed those together and it created a really pretty shade of orange. And you could see that some of them are darker and some of them are a little lighter, and I wanted to create that effect, and that was easy to do by varying the amount of each of the colors that I used to mix together. On different pumpkins, I added a little bit more yellow or a little bit more of the mauve color or even a little bit more of the marigold color, and I love the way that creates some variation in the pumpkins. For the stems, I use a combination of Shimmerz Golden Wheat, and then I also used some vibes Here Comes the Sun. Once I had a lighter base color down, I wanted to add some accents using a darker color. I used an Inkling's Penny for Your Thoughts. So you could see that I'm using all different types of Shimmerz paints, some sprays, some of them are in those smaller containers, and they all mix together and they all work beautifully together. And before I forget, I just wanted to mention that when you place an order with Shimmerz, if you use my name in the comments, you'll receive a free gift. I always forget to mention that until the very end. The reason that I'm cutting that little swirly piece off of the pumpkins is because I'm going to layer the cut file, which you could see off to the left right now, on top of these pumpkins. And I didn't think it was necessary to have two of those. I thought they'd be a little tricky to line up, so I thought I would just use the one that's on the cut file. To add a little bit of a darker green to the leaves, I'm using a colorings spray, and the name of that color is Clary Sage. I hope I'm saying that right. I mixed the green together with a little bit of the gold color splash back in the saddle, and this made it look a little bit darker, and I also liked the way it made it look a little bit more golden. I thought that was perfect for the fall. Then I even used back in the saddle to add a couple of little lines to some of the pumpkin stems. Now all of the paint on the pumpkins is dry, and I layer the cut file on top. I just attach that down with some gel glue. I have all of my leaves and my pumpkins to the left of the layout, and I am now working on the background. So I have mounted all of those wood slats on a beautiful piece of paper from the Shimmerz October color kits, and then this is another piece of the pattern paper that I have cut down to fit behind my photo. To ink the edges of this piece of pattern paper, I'm using Distress ink in ground espresso, and then I distress the edges just a little bit. I don't want a highly distressed look, but I do want the edges to look a little bit tattered just because the photo is going to go on top of that rustic looking wood background. So I fit my photo in the center of that paper, and now I'm going to attach my photo down to the center of my background. There are a lot of steps to this layout. I was just having fun with all of the paints and the leaves. I wanted to ink the edges of all of the leaves, once again with the Distress ink in ground espresso. The dies that I used to make these leaves cut out holes so that you could stitch in them. I think that stitching is really beautiful. It is a little time consuming, but I just love the results. Of course, it's not necessary, but it is another little detail if you like stitching, which I really don't like stitching other than on scrapbook pages, but I just love the effect, so I think that it's worth it. I doubled up some gold thread and I stitched each of the leaves, and then I used those backing pieces. I thought that that would help the leaves to kind of stand out from everything else on this layout. So finally, it's time to start attaching some of the embellishments down. I have lots of pumpkins in a number of different sizes. I had quite a few left over as well, but I decided to arrange them around the base of my photo. This is a photo of both of my daughters. It was taken when we went apple picking a couple of years ago. We used to go every single year, and even though they're older, we just decided we were going to go apple picking to the same farm that we always went to when they were younger. One more time, maybe. I don't know. Maybe we'll go again. I hope so. And then I began arranging the leaves around not only the pumpkins, but also I wanted to have a cluster above the photo. I wanted to work this die cut into the cluster above the photo, and it's very exciting. In the past, we got a cut apart sheet with all of the images on it, but now we get a pack of die cuts, and you don't have to cut them out. They are all ready to put right on your pages. Then I went back to that stack of leaves and I began positioning the leaves all over the layout. I was thinking at this point that I wanted them to look like they were almost falling across the page. I ended up switching that up just a little bit by the end. There were some tiny little leaves from the kit, and I thought those were perfect to use with the larger leaves that I had. I always liked the variety of sizes of different elements on the page. And then I was able to use this from the kit. It is a sticker that says "Fall is proof that change is beautiful." I thought that would be a great title. I mounted it on a piece of the pattern paper from the kit, and then I inked all of the edges. I'm going to place that on the right-hand side of my photo. At first, I was thinking that I might overlap it slightly on the photo, but then I decided to move it a little bit to the right of the photo. Once I had the title on the page, I started to rethink some of the positioning of the leaves. I thought that they would look nice clustered around the title. As usual, I keep changing my mind about where I want to place the embellishments on the page. It's just something that I guess I really enjoy doing. I like to try out different possibilities, and sometimes multiple things look good. Sometimes it's hard to decide where to position embellishments, and you'll see that I switch things around right now. I was thinking that it might look nice to have a pumpkin over the photo, so I placed one up there at the top of the layout, and then I began to take some of those leaves that I had attached down in some other places and cluster those around the pumpkin at the top. And then I did a little bit of rearranging of the pumpkins at the bottom. I ended up using all of the die cut leaves in the clusters, the ones with the pumpkins and also the title cluster, but I still place those 3 little leaves in different places on the layout. I have one over the title, and then right now I have those 2 small leaves in the upper left-hand corner, but I move those around a little bit. There was a sticker pack that had some sunflowers, and I thought that the sunflowers might look nice added into the layout. I love the fact that they were yellow. There were a few stickers that had sunflowers on them. There was a long strip, you could see that to the right, and then I also placed a sunflower on the title, and then I'm going to use sunflowers from the strip to put underneath the photo, and I'm also going to use a couple of those flowers and embellish one of the pumpkins with them. I placed the strip of sunflowers on a piece of white cardstock, and then I fussy cut out all around it. I just like to make it a little bit more sturdy, and then I cut the strip of sunflowers to size. I tucked the strip underneath the photo, and then I fussy cut out 2 of the flowers, and I place those on the pumpkin, and I like the way there are sunflowers in 3 different spots on the layout. I forgot to mention that I added a candle sticker to the title cluster earlier. In the color kit, we got a set of 3 dots. Those are circles, and they have a nice shiny surface. So there was a pretty one of a leaf, and I tucked that in the cluster on the right-hand side. And now I'm adding some photo corners. I used the same pattern paper that I used behind the title for the photo corners, and I punched those out using an EK Success scalloped photo corner punch, one of my favorite punches of all time. I had taken away that die cut that I had on top of the photo, and then I was thinking that would look really nice on either side of the cluster that I have there, so I cut it in half and I tucked it on both sides of the pumpkin cluster, and I think that really added a nice little element to it. It's been a while since I used brads on one of my layouts, but I was just in the mood to add a different texture, and I thought that these brads would look nice. They would kind of look like nails in the wood background. At first I thought I would have 3 pumpkins on one side and 2 on the other, but then I ended up evening it out and adding a small pumpkin on the right hand side. I also switched the pumpkin at the top for a slightly smaller pumpkin. I thought that would look a little bit more balanced. I liked the areas that looked distressed on those wood pieces in the background, so I went ahead and bent the paper up in a number of areas to make it look a little bit more distressed. That was the last touch. This layout is complete, and here are some close-ups. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope that you enjoyed it. I had a really fun time working with all of the paints and all of the elements of the October color kits. In the description box, you'll find links to the Shimmerz website where you could check out all of their beautiful color kits. And don't forget to use my name in the description box to get a free paint when you place a Shimmerz order. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a fantastic day. Take care. Bye-bye.